Here we go. All right, so we're going to do the first portion of the Apex Operate spreadsheet, which shows how we have to work everything out at time of purchase for the lender and for the sponsor. Okay, so a lot of the basic stuff is up at the top of the spreadsheet. We've seen that in class, and as I said in class, the first thing we've got to do is work on the lender. The lender drives everything, okay? And typically what's known for the lender is the interest rate, the amount that is being loaned out, the term of the loan, and the points. And what needs to be found, and this will be your job if you get an internship working for a lender, an entry-level job, we need to find the uniform payment, okay? And we're just going to use goal-seek as we have before. So I've got the cash flow diagram from the lender's point of view up there. And what I've got here is I've got the lender's cash flow table without points here starting in row 50. And we just have to fill it in, okay? So let's see if we can do that. We'll fill in what we can, and then we'll use goal-seek to make sure everything's perfect. So the lender's first cash flow at t equals 0, that's going to be equal to the amount that they have said they would contribute to the purchase price, which is over here in E45. That's $842,000. The interest rate, I just want to put it here so it's handy. Our interest rate, as we know, is 10%. I don't want to hard code that. I want to refer to our 10% over here. So I got our 10%. Okay, I'm going to need to figure this out. As always, I'm going to need the present value of every stinking cash flow using that 10%. So what's the present value of that 842,000? It's going to be the 842,000 divided by 1 plus the interest rate raised to the amount of time that's elapsed from that cash flow to t equals 0, which is handily up here, up above. And we better get 841,723, which we do. And the way that we're going to get these uniform payments is we're going to keep guessing at the uniform payment until our NPV equals 0, okay? So let me put a guess in up here. So let's say something like 50,000. Okay, so the uniform payment that they're going to get back in every year, 50,000. They put out 841,000. They get back 50,000 every year. And now I can sum up all the individually present values here. So I'm going to just say I want the sum of all of my present values, and something went wrong with that, so let's try that again. Okay. Okay, and am I done here? No, somehow this guy got clobbered. I want to make sure I have a present value every time. And is there anything I'm missing from this table now? I don't think so. I think I'm pretty good. So what I need to do now is I need to keep guessing at this uniform payment until my NPV is equal to 0 using my 10% rate. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to use goal-seek. So I'll say data what-if analysis, goal-seek, and oops, where'd it go here? I don't know what happened there. let's try that again. Data, what if analysis, goal seek, there it is down there. Okay, so I want to set the NPV, the sum of all the PVs, to value 0 by changing my guess at the uniform payment. So I go ahead and do that, and blammo, I get our 89,000. Okay, I'm going to keep going because I am recording this, so you'll be able to look at it and go slow with it. Okay, so let's keep going. The next, we want to just take care of the lender. So the next thing we want to do is get the lender's comprehensive cash flows and figure out what their IRR is, including everything, including fees and all that jazz. Okay, so here, if I wanted, I could have just one row here saying cash flows including principal, interest, fees. I put it in 2 rows here. Going forward, we're not going to have everything spoon-fed for you all set up, so you'll have to figure this out yourself like you had to in the little in-class test that we had. So this is the way I did it. So the cash flows for the lender, principal and interest, are equal to what we've got up here, where we didn't consider any fees. Okay, so I can just bring that right along. And points, terminology with points is if you have upfront fees, they're called points, okay? As long as they are a percent of the loaned amount. Our agreement in this case is that the upfront fees or points are going to be 3% of the principal loaned, okay? So I'm not going to hard code that in either. I'm going to say, where is the amount loaned? Here's my amount loaned, and I'm going to say times that 3%, okay? And that gives me my 25,000. So I think down here in row 63, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, I've got the lender's comprehensive cash flows, because the lender the only cash flows are what they pay at closing to CAG, what they get at closing from CMO, and then just that uniform payment for 30 years. Okay, so I think that's good, and the to get the IRR for these guys, you could use the IRR formula, but you all know how dangerous that is now. So I'm going to use goal seek. So to get the IRR, I'm going to make a guess at the IRR, and then I'm going to present value each one of those cash flows using my guess for the IRR, and I'm going to keep changing my guess until the sum of the PVs of all the cash flows equal to 0. This is what we did before on exam 1. We're just doing it with a 30-year mortgage now. Okay, so I'm going to go back to goal seek, and I'm going to say make the sum of those present values equal to 0 by changing my guess for the IRR. Okay, and it solves that for me, and it gives me the IRR for the lender considering her comprehensive cash flows is 10.4%. So 2 important things to note about that. One is it's greater than 10%, the nominal interest rate. It always has to be greater if they're charging fees, and they should always charge some fees, right? Helps them make more money. And the other thing that we want to note about this is that even though this fee cash flow positive cash flow here is at t equals 0, of course, it still affects the IRR overall because the IRR takes into account everything. Okay, so now I think we're done with the lender, right? We've got, for each player, we have to get their comprehensive cash flows, we have to compute an IRR or an NPV and evaluate that. Is it worth it, yes or no? So if her interest rate, with lenders you can think of that as their opportunity cost of capital, is 10%, she's making more than that on this deal, good project for her, okay? All right, so let's do a little bit more with this. All right, now let's do everything we can related to the purchase and the mortgage obligations for the sponsor. Sponsor is going to be really complicated because we have to do this, purchase and mortgage obligations, but then we're also going to have to get their after-tax cash flows from operating the property and their after-tax cash flows from selling the property to get their net comprehensive cash flows for this whole project. So we'll take it one step at a time. Let's get all the cash flows associated with purchasing the property for the sponsor and the mortgage obligation they're entering into. Okay, so at t equal 0, all they have is the amount they've gotten the lender in our little roll forward mortgage interest amortization table. So I'm going to say here, this is equal to the principal amount, the amount that the lender is contributing to purchasing this property. Okay, so that's in E29, that's the mortgage balance. Now I'm going to start, the way to work with these roll forward tables is do 1 year at a time. And when you feel that you've got a year that is standard and representative of all the other years, then you can just drag it across. But complete 1 year before you move on to further years. So I'm just going to go through the headings on this table and put in everything I need. Okay, loan principal at BOP. Can anyone tell me that? Loan principal at beginning of year 1. Exactly. It's the at beginning of year 1 is t equals 0, and that's the mortgage amount. So that's going to be, it's always, in fact, going to be the principal amount at the end of the prior year. Principal 0 is equal to principal amount at beginning of year 1. Okay, mortgage payment, anyone tell me what that is? Josh, you got it? Yeah. And it's a mortgage, so that's going to be true every year, right? That payment. Okay. So I'm going to just, again, I'm not going to hard code that in. I'm going to go up to where we first computed that number, and I'm going to say that. So it's our 89,289. The interest portion of the payment, who remembers how to compute that? We've got our payments. Some will be interest, some will be amortization. Nicole? At beginning of year or end of year? Okay, it's always beginning of year. We always assume in here that all of our payments are made at the end of the period. Okay, so we have had this principal sitting around therefore for a whole year. So it'll always be the beginning. Good question. All right, so I want to get my interest portion. I'm going to go back up to where the 10% is defined, okay, and I'm going to say times my beginning of period principal balance, okay, And you can see I've been a little sneaky here. I called that interest rate. I just named it, and that'll be fixed and consistent throughout everything. All right, so Nikhil, you already gave us what the principal amortization portion of this payment is. Can you tell us again? Yep. It's the total amount minus the interest portion. All right, and that's looking good. All right, and then I think Nikhil told me this before too, so who else could tell me now what's the new principal balance after we have made a payment? Some of it was interest, some of it was amortization. Yeah, minus the amortization amount. That's perfect. Okay, so we're just going to say equal to this minus this. Okay. And just while I'm here, in the real world, when you get your internships and jobs, formatting counts big time, okay? And also, while you're in school, formatting counts to help you not make mistakes. So when I see something like this, I'm a little bit dyslexic and I just want everything to look good. I'm immediately going to make a consistent set of decimals for all of these numbers so I can just read everything carefully, make sure I don't have a mistake. So I'm going to go back to this number and I'm just going to make it no decimal places because all the others have no decimal places. Okay, it's just a good practice tip. Okay, I feel that everything we have for year one is general and should work for every year. Okay, so I'm just going to pull it all over to year 30. But before I do that, what should the loan principal, the amount that still needs to be repaid at the end of year 30 be if we did this right? Zero, right? Because it's an amortizing loan. So at the end of the loan period, you've amortized it all. You've paid off all your principal. So it should be zero. So let's pull it across and see what we get here. Okay. And there we go. We have zero. Okay, heads up, those of you with Macs, you might get like $5, $10, minus $20, something like that. The floating point algorithm in Excel for floating point arithmetic is not perfect on the Mac, okay? So another reason why it's so awesome if you don't have a Mac. Okay, under Windows, Excel, floating point arithmetic works better. Okay, and I think that's pretty much, right now, we have figured out everything we need to for the lender. We're done with the lender. And we've figured out everything we need to for the sponsor related to the purchase and the sponsor's contract with the lender. And just looking ahead a little bit, why were we so careful about pulling out the interest portion and the principal amortization? Anyone know that? We're going to need both of those numbers in the future. When we're operating, the amount of interest we pay is an expense that we can declare on our tax return. So we can subtract that from the money we make. So we need to know that, okay? For every one of the 5 years we're operating this, we're going to need to know the interest we paid because that's a deduction. So that's going to be helpful. Anyone help me with why we need to know every year the loan principal remaining at the end of the year? In other words, why am I torturing you with this table? Why do we have to know all these details? We need to know this. Now let's think about the sale. When this gets sold, when Michael sells this in 5 years, it's going to be okay with the mortgage lender, no early payment penalty, but what's the mortgage lender going to say? That's fine, but you still have this amount of principal you haven't repaid. You have to repay that. So that'll come into our calculations when CMO sells the building. They're going to need to know how much they have to pay off the lender to get out of that contract, and they're going to have to make that payment. Okay, so that's why we do this table. This is a great place to stop. So let's pick up with this. I'll give you I'll be back to giving you videos for this week and homework from this week, and we'll pick it up again next Tuesday.